Alright, welcome back everyone. Let's try to make another change to our application. Notice that when I create a to-do, I provide the ID for the to-do that I'm creating. This is not a common practice. Probably what you want to do is to have a client to just give you the text for the to-do, and then you take care of the ID assignment under the hood, because that's more of an implementation detail, something that we probably need to be able to uniquely identify different to-dos, distinguish them, search for them, and it's not something that a client needs to think about. So in our example where we were using functional programming, we had this variable which was helping us to create a sort of an auto-incrementing integer effect, where like the first to-do would have an ID of 1, and then the second one would have an ID of 2, and so on and so forth. We can go and create something similar to that. So if I wanted to, let's say, have a variable like this and drop it in here, and I don't want people to know about it, I don't want people to be able to access it, and I can even like initialize it here to 1 like this. And so what we can do here, we can go and give this like next to do, this hashtag next to do. So use this value and then increment it, sort of the same as here, right? Use it and then increment it. So use it and then increment it, right? Okay, great. So let's go and maybe try to create two to-dos now. To-do 1, to-do 2, buy milk, buy bread. And then let's take all of these out and say we just want to print out these two IDs. So let's go here, clear the console and do the printing. Interestingly, both of them have the ID of 1. So what's happening here? Well, what happens is that each object gets their own copy of this variable, and each object starts at that value of 1. And when you increment it, you have incremented your own copy of next to do ID. Next to do ID is an example of a variable that needs to be shared between all the instances of to do class. Now we can go in a few different ways about implementing this. One of the handy ways that you can achieve this in JavaScript is by using static classes. So we can go here and change this to be a static element. And when it is a static element, it's not really a property of the object, it is the property of that class. So you access it with the class name. Okay. Now if I go and run the code again, you're going to see that these values are correctly being updated, because when the first one increments the next to do ID, the second one uses the same shared counter. And if I were to even go and add another one, let's buy jam as well, right? And so let's print it out, and you can see we got 1, 2, 3. So this is a static variable for us, and it has its own use cases, such as the case that you see over here. I want to add one other thing to the mix here, and that has to do with these examples that I've written here. Now you don't want to write examples like this in a class file, so to speak. The place of these is not in here. It is like more of a demo, and so maybe what I want to do is to create a demo file, and eventually we might delete the demo file, or we might just leave it be, because we want to eventually use our to-do class inside the actual application. So let's go to the demo file and drop these things in here, and then I'm gonna go and try to run the code by accessing the demo. And so when I try to do that, it says to-do is not defined. So it is not recognizing the to-do as an entity in my application, even though I have it defined here in this file. So what's going on here? Well, each file here is configured to be what is called a module. And so you have this configuration because if you look at the package.json, we said use type module. And also later when we're going to go put this in our application, if you look at index.html and you see how the source file is being embedded, its type is module. And so module is a way of creating abstractions, while creating encapsulations, really, to do some level of information hiding. And they actually precede the addition of classes into the JavaScript programming language. Well, let me backtrack for a moment. The story goes like this. So people recognize that they don't want to write like all of their code in one file, right? And that would, like, if the app is larger, you want to break it down and modularize it and put it in multiple files. The other thing people realized was that if you write code across many different files, it's very possible that you may end up like declaring a variable in one file and 10 files later declare a variable with the exact same name. And if all of that data is sort of part of the same scope, then you're going to have clashes between variables, right? It's hard to keep track of what is happening. So developers, the community of developers, started crafting their own solutions to create what other programming languages had, like modules or packages. And so there were a lot of different efforts, and some of them became more popular. One that was very popular was called Common.js, and it was a way of creating modules. But at about the same time that the class syntax was standardized and it was added to JavaScript, a modern style of creating modules was also standardized. And so this is known as module ES6 because it comes from that standardization. Anyways, making long story short, the way we need to use it is like this. If you have a file and you want to export, well, I mean, by default, everything in that file is just available in that file. So here we know Todo exists. Outside of this file, we don't know such thing, right? And if you want to export something, if you want to make it available, then you have to go and use the export keyword to say that, okay, outside of this file, people would know that this class exists. And then more so, you have to go and explicitly import it. So you have to go and say Todo, I want to import it from, and I'm gonna go to this file. So now if I go and run this code, I'm gonna see the output that I expect. Okay, so you can export multiple things. So if this was like a long file and it has a lot of different variables and classes and constants and all sorts of functions and things defined in it, maybe there is a handful of entities that I want to export, and this is the way you go about exporting it. One of the common practices that people tend to follow is to somehow signal there is like one entity that is the main entity that you want to export from a file. And if that is the case, you would go and say default here. And when you say the default, then here you don't have to use curly bracket. You can import it like this. A slightly different syntax for doing this is to go and drop this at the bottom like this. I like this syntax better because like it could be a lot of lines of code up there, right? And I don't want to have to look in there to see what is the default export. I would like to go at the bottom and see that, oh, okay, so that's what is being exported by default. And it's more of a semantic distinction that has some syntax implication, where if it's a default export, you don't wrap it in curly bracket. But if you run it, it works just exactly the same as before.